Another banger of a video. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to, well, this video basically. So this is going to be a longer format video for anybody that is used to my short formats. This is also testing out the waters for myself because I'm not sure if I'm going to be doing this as well. This is going to be a interview or a conversation that I had a little over a week ago with me and Bad Kids, also known as Bad Kids Good People, on both Instagram and SoundCloud. There's going to be a small introduction to who he actually is, as well as all the work that he's put in when it comes to both music-wise as well as being able to bring funk sets and live shows to the DMV area. We go further into a conversation throughout the next hour and a half of this entire interview and this entire conversation. So this is also going to be available both on Spotify as well. If you guys aren't able to have this video play throughout the entirety of you guys actually listening to this entire conversation, all I want to say is make sure you actually like and subscribe, because I do want to do this for every single person that is both on the End of Underground tour, as well as anybody that is also interested in sharing their story on how they were able to go from being a producer to having live sets, especially people that are in the funk community and people that also know me. If you guys are also interested, just let me know. My DMs are always open. I'm always on Instagram. Well, not really, because I kind of lowered the amount of time I'm on there all the time. Hope you guys actually enjoy. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you all in the next video. From the DMV, this man has a discography that spans more than 5 years. He has a recent tape, Ultra Instinct, released in 2022 with names such as Stupid Beats, Snake, and Loser. He has 2 EPs with Phonk heavyweights Blunted and Odd One Out, and is not only part of the Masterminds collective, but has also joined up with Marijuana Mafia in most recent news. Ladies and gentlemen, Bad Kids Good People.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, it's an honor to be here, bro. Like, I just want to talk about like just the overall journey that not just you've gone on, but just overall the community in general, because it's definitely boomed in like the last 2 years.
Yeah, it's been crazy having everything kind of move in sync. People starting to network and bringing the genre to the live scene, really picking up quickly. So it's always good to talk and shoot the shit.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot. It's definitely a lot going on. Especially, I remember first DM we probably had, and this is definitely something I do want to talk about like later on as like we get in conversation. Like just the year that's happened, like just like the first show that we met each other at, and then how we were able to basically get the top person in the genre of funk to be able to headline in not just our stomping grounds, but basically start a tour basically.
Yeah, no, it's crazy how quickly stuff is moving. I mean, I remember a little bit over a year ago when Tyler, who he's my manager now, part of 𝖒𝖏𝖚𝖝𝖚𝖝𝖋𝖎𝖏𝖚, which is a local label to the DMV area. There's some other great artists on it, but when he first reached out, he was like, "Hey, I got Vamp coming to Baltimore. Would you be willing to open?" And I'm thinking, like, I mean, we always get those like overly ambitious DMs from people that we've not really talked to before, and I was like, one, there's no way that he's gonna get Vamp to come out here and do like a funk set, and then two, like, no way in hell I'm doing a live set. Like, I've never even put thought into that. And then a couple weeks later, he was just like, "Hey, I got Vamp coming. Do you want to come meet me, network with some of the other folks in the community?" And yeah, that was, I think you went to that show too. That was pretty cool to see. And all of a sudden, you know, we're a year later, Ryan's going on tour. The Black Box has really made a name for itself in the community with the Funk Around and Find Out people. Some stuff going on in Texas. And then, you know, I'd be remiss to forget that Alan, those French homies, and then Teddy Color in the UK, they're even putting some stuff on. So there are all these kind of tiny, super niche bubbles that are all kind of growing in stride, which is really cool to see. That doesn't necessarily happen in every genre, and it doesn't happen overnight, but it kind of feels like it's been happening overnight. So an exciting time for us.
Yeah, it's actually kind of funny because no one ever thought that this was gonna happen, especially how fast it's been happening. Like just last year, there was only, think about like 1 or 2 shows you would even be able to see that is if one, you promoted it on your Instagram, or 2, if you could surprisingly know somebody that's local. It's actually kind of crazy how everything just moves so quickly in this short span of time, because literally last year we didn't even know each other, versus now we're literally going to different shows. We've been to probably less than half a dozen shows together, and you've definitely performed at multiple shows, even though you've only performed, I would say, less than a year, or probably almost beginning to be a year.
Yeah, I think I'm just coming up on a year. And again, I mean, like mixing, you can hopefully kind of figure the fundamentals somewhat quickly, but I mean, I got ways to go to do what some other people can do on those decks. It's incredible. No, it's gonna be a busy July with everything coming up, you know. I mean, Ryan's going on tour, some other shows happening. But to your point, man, I mean, yeah, like we linked up what, like a little less or a little over a year ago, more or less. And like you kind of see across the community, I mean, everyone's really out here trying to network and super supportive of each other. It's really supportive. I think that's probably helped foster this growth, you know? It's not one of those genres where everyone's super isolated in silos trying to necessarily like outdo one another. It's more like let's work together and try to make something out of this, right?
Yeah, bro. The funny thing about that, I definitely haven't had a bad interaction when it comes to like people talking in either DMs or just conversations on social media in general. It's just everybody's so welcoming. Just I haven't met anybody, thankfully, that has given me like a bad feel or anything. Like even when I went to my first show outside of the DMV, basically, like everybody was so warm and welcoming, basically. It's so weird to think that like previously I would think nobody would be open to just crashing with somebody or just hanging out with somebody for an entire day, let alone an entire weekend. And now I'm just more open to do that, more open to meet new people, especially in the community. It's just crazy that everybody's so welcoming, and I feel like I've said the word welcoming like 3 or 4 times in like the last 2 minutes, but it's just so weird that this entire community, like the entire Phonk community, is basically, there's definitely a lot of really good people in this community as well.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more.
I have another question. So how many shows have you done in general, just to like give your perspective on that? Because I know personally I'm more of a fan before it comes to the actual music. Like I've said that to multiple people, that I'm more of a funk listener than basically a producer, because I was a listener, and I still am a listener over like the past, I would say, 4 to 5 years. Two questions. One, who's like the first person that you think of when you hear the word funk? Or, and the second question is also, what's your perspective, how has your perspective changed since basically becoming a producer versus being a listener?
Yeah, those are good questions. Guess to your first point, like it's an easy answer, I think. Just Ryan Celsius when I think of funk, because I mean, sort of a way to cheat out of an answer, right? Because he just lays out such a diverse amount of different artists in the scene. But I guess aside from that, you know, if I had to pick an artist, then someone like Von Storm, Ponsuda, pretty much anyone from Purple Posse or Holy Mob. Again, it's hard to pin it down, but I think that's what makes funk able to grow and stuff, right? That you can't necessarily contain it to just one sound or one style, and you'd be remiss not to think about all the other ones. But I guess for background, like really to your point, I think that a lot of the scene starts as listeners and becomes passionate about the genre, and then they realize it's pretty easy to set up and get going within a DAW like FL Studio, and they start producing, and all of a sudden organically they start to get into that whole habit. But the way I got into it was I actually went to high school with Katabi, and in college I was like really into skateboarding and snowboarding and just subcultures in general, but kept busting myself up so much I couldn't really skate or ride anymore without popping my shoulder out. So I was stuck there. Like I got to find something else to get into. Really around like I guess 2015, 2016. That was a big era for SoundCloud. So I was on there and was talking to Katabi, who's really starting to crank up on his passion for producing. Started out like Fiend Club, but he was sending me some of his early work, talking about like, oh yeah, you know, there's this guy Green Piccolo. Look at what we made together. I'm like, never heard of these people, but I started listening to his stuff. Kind of went down that rabbit hole of looking at like Green Piccolo back when Vamp, like listening to it. I'm like, all right. I mean, I kind of had a music background growing up. Like, let me just play around with the drum machine and see where it goes, you know, and just trial and error, screwing around. And it was really cool. But I mean, everyone, I feel like, has a different opinion on this, but I actually think it's a strength that, like, you hear the term, like, that comedian is a comedian's comedian, or like, that, you know, cinematographer, like, you know, is a cinematographer for cinematographers. I guess the point I'm making is that funk is really like a listener base full of other producers, which, yeah, like you can say maybe that makes it oversaturated, but at the same time, it's kind of like this sounds a bit meta, but this like conscious evolving of the genre where everyone who's listening and passionate about it can say, well, I like that element. Here's how I would do it differently. And then all of a sudden, everyone's just firing out all sorts of different rips and different tracks. And people say that they're worried it oversaturates it. I actually think it's probably the contrary. That's keeps it from what's going stale, because God knows when I started, I just wanted to do like what 𝖒𝖏𝖗𝖚𝖝𝖚 did. Like I thought he was just the greatest producer I'd ever heard. And like it wasn't by being the most like intricate or complex. He wasn't doing like rock math or whatever, that sure, like there's a lot of thought that goes into that, but just like bringing these elements together to create such a cool and like laid back and like trill vibe to it. I was just like, that's what I want to be. And so when I started producing like that, I was like, yeah, you know, like maybe I'm just like a Walmart version of 𝖒𝖏𝖗𝖚𝖚, but I couldn't like perfectly replicate it. So then I kind of like pivoted a bit to like be somewhat in my own lane. But I mean, if you listen to my discography or anyone else's, you see the inspirations there. I mean, Local Stranger, he's in MASTERMINDS, and super nice dude, super talented too. I mean, his growth has been incredible, and you can kind of see the impression that people like Barry Main might have had on him.
Yeah,
but he's not a
especially
clone.
like like with his, I think his recent album that he just dropped, like that's just like all the tracks are just masterpieces.
Yeah, he has attention to detail. And again, it's like as much as someone wants to just copy someone else, which I don't think he tried to do by any means, like you can see where he gets inspiration, but like there's still such a unique sound that like when you hear his stuff, you know it's his, or like Odd One Out, especially with what he does. What he chooses to sample is completely different a lot of the time than what I would ever spend time on. And I love that. Like that's part of the benefit of collaborating too, right? Like when I first started producing, I was like, who the hell would want to do a collaboration? Like, I want to have full control over what I'm doing. I don't want to share the credit. And it was like a really, really dumb, like insulated way to think. And then finally, I kind of like saw how the community kind of lives and breathes. Like, I saw these collectives popping up, like Lost Boys. I'm like, all right, I want to join a collective. I want to start networking with the community to try to like build new sounds and stuff. And probably almost all of my favorite tracks are collaborations because I got to work on different elements that I never would have known where to start like cutting from and building from.
Man, it's kind of funny the fact that you brought up Oz's name too, because to me, I feel like he's sort of like the collaboration god when it comes to funk in general. Like I don't know how in the world he's able to do so many tracks and collab with so many people in such a short amount of time. Like him and Rocket Man are literally like the collab guys when it comes to the community in general. Like I have no idea how they're able to pop out so many tracks in general. Like I could barely finish one per month versus them. I'm seeing them drop something like either weekly or bi-weekly. It's just crazy.
It's madness. And I mean, what I've loved just being able to have Odd One Out's ear is like that dude's pretty precise and like masterful with how to grow on platforms like Spotify. I mean, like to your point, him and Rocket Man like can work so quickly and work across so many different ideas with so many different people. Like it's a nice thread. I mean, speaking of Rocket Man, dude, like that man is everywhere. I know we were talking about it the other way.
He's such a goat in general. My bad for us saying that, but like he's such a friendly, cool dude. Like we talked about this in conversation, I think last week too. Like it's just crazy how this one person we know him, or like either we met him or like we hear him in conversation, or like just the beat battles that we have in 808. It's just like he's just everywhere, and like you can't not hear his name in general because he's literally either collabing with somebody, he's either on a feature with somebody, or he's on a tape with somebody. Just like this one person is everywhere, and it's such a great thing that he's just, I don't even know what else to say, because like he's just such a goat when it comes to just networking with each and every single artist, whether they're big or small.
Yeah, no, he's a great producer, and to your point, like super nice guy. I mean, we talk about the growth over the last year with these shows popping up, but I think what's also super cool that you alluded to is like this man's on a mission. Like he did set out in like Denver, and then I think a little bit after he drove all the way out to the East Coast and stopped by, like got to work with him on some stuff, and then all of a sudden now what? He's like out in Europe meeting like Roland Jones. He's with Rob and like No Sauce and some of those homies. It's a really cool little thread that helps connect all of these like different islands, like I tried to put earlier. So it's good. I mean, I think one of the reasons why everyone's so warm and welcoming, or I guess there's multiple reasons, but like the way that I think about it a lot is that, at least for me personally, like you had this golden era of funk and like, I don't know, like 15 to 17, 2015 to 2017. And then like when I really started producing, like all of a sudden the pandemic hit, everyone's stuck at home. I had nothing else to do than but like make music and like start just like hitting people up and chatting online, right? Like I'm sure that a lot of people like turn to Discord too. And so all of a sudden you have like I don't have the numbers on me, but probably double, triple the amount of people making funk potentially, like an exponential amount more of just networks and people communicating and talking about it. And then again, I mean, you had like those early adopters that were really starting to try to put on shows. Like props to Corey and the Black Box for what they're doing out there. That was really cool to see. But I think people were just like eager coming out of the pandemic, like whether or not they were in funk, if the regular person want to get out there and like network and talk with people and everyone. So you had this chronically online genre, if you will, where like the biggest issue is people are just aspiring to finally like get out and like network and like meet each other in the live scene. So that hopefully, in my mind, or theoretically, is also what is propelling people to be so supportive and be so motivated to go out and try to make this build out this genre, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Like, especially when it came to the pandemic, it probably was definitely the worst when it came to just being secluded in general. I saw this last year, and definitely, especially at the shows, everybody was so eager to go to live sets or just start to DJ in general. You had so many people that just wanted to get out and go do something. I remember the first time I wanted to go to a concert, it was like it got canceled because of the pandemic. I think it was mid 2020, and then I just waited like a whole year or two just to go to another show. Like it didn't even matter if it was either hip-hop, it didn't matter if it was funk, it really didn't matter. I was just eager to go to a show. So when I first started to get more into producing or get more into the community in general, I started just talking to different people and just linking with others and finding out what shows are when. As soon as I saw something pop up, I think it was the first vamp show that he did in Baltimore. It was definitely probably the highlight of my year last year, because never went to like a DJ set except if it was featuring an artist, but it was just such a different vibe in general. Like you definitely get something different when you're watching a DJ set versus watching someone perform. It definitely feels a lot more personal. You can definitely see it with people that also go to those shows. These are the same people that listen to the same music as me, or these are the same people that have gone through the same discography, basically, I would say, and they're interested in the same different genres, the same different people that you listen to. It's kind of funny versus being secluded during COVID and then going out. There's so many people that listen to the same music as you. It's just such a great thing.
Yeah, and I mean, to your point, like that first vamp show, man, I was pretty nervous. I wasn't nervous for myself or like whether or not vamp would do well. I was just kind of thinking about like turnout, and the turnout was pretty good. I think that what we're gonna see hopefully like in the next year is a lot more funk shows starting to pop up, because I think that a lot of promoters who have been regularly like putting on a lot of shows in the local scene, I mean, they do a lot of it out of pocket. Like if they're in the hole, they're in the hole there, you know? So whenever you're talking about planning a show, it's like, well, how many people realistically can we draw with this? Can we make enough money to be sustainable to then throw another show like this? And I mean, early indication is there is a lot of demand and it's going really well. And so if Ryan's able to do God's work here, you know, and have all these tour stops, really bring funk into the live scene, you know, then we're going to have a lot more shows like that. I've always been nervous, like going in for my first few sets, and it's always a question at the back of my mind is like, how is, you know, like my style or what I'm playing going to work with, you know, this audience that maybe some of them have passively listened to a little bit of vamp or a little bit of Smokey, but like the funk is pretty wide. Something else I think that really will help in my mind with these live shows is that this is an oversimplification, but I think in a lot of like EDM or bass music scenes, there's a lot of DJs who then kind of start to dabble and start to produce, and then they kind of do both in tandem, but they're generally starting out a bit more on the mixing and DJ side, so they're super talented people, especially like on the decks. But it's kind of been the opposite, I think, on the funk side, where a lot of people who are learning and figuring out how to mix have been producing for a couple of years. And what I think that leads to is that you have a bunch of different artists who go up and are able to spin like funk or other, genres on the periphery in their own mindset and definition. So you could have a bunch of artists that might be generically called funk, but every single set I think is going to be pretty different. Not to overpromise there, but like thinking about like the type of stuff that I choose to spin versus like what 𝖒𝖝𝖗𝖏𝖚 does, like, I mean, it seems like a pretty different tone and they both work great, but it helps it from not being too stale where, you feel like every single show is going to be the same thing. I think that that's yet to be proven just because there haven't been many shows yet, but that's something that I'm anticipating. And I think that that's the benefit of really having all these people who are mixing, who started building out their discography and started thinking about what they like, what they want to sound like,
Yeah. You know what that reminds me of a little bit? It reminds me of one, the first Vamp show I went to, the second Vamp show, and then when I first listened to you and Saint on the decks at the charity show. I remember the first show, I definitely noticed that it was a good percentage, especially I can't remember who it was that went on before him. Well, in context,
I think was it Rest in Pierce?
I think it was Pierce, but it's funny because Pierce basically his entire set was hip hop up until like his very end of his set, and when Vamp got on, he basically combined both like what he was spinning as well as what he was gonna spin, like, which is basically his discography, and just the way that it blended, it sounded almost perfect at that point. Because one, I didn't know, well, it's funny because like I definitely don't know how to spin as well as they do, but it just seems like it blends perfectly, especially during the time. Just like you said earlier, just blending different genres in general, it sounds difficult and it might be difficult, but like when it happens, it just basically sounds perfect. And it's just surprising how well it blends or how well it sounds, even though in your head you might be thinking 1,000 times like, I hope this sounds good, I hope this sounds good, does it sound good, or does anybody know that I messed up or anything. Similar to like, I remember one time I was listening to one of BadKidsGoodPeople's sets on his YouTube channel, and it's kind of crazy how he's able to blend both like wave music or basically his own music library, and how he's able to blend both old Purple Posse tracks basically versus his newer tracks basically. It's kind of cool to see this dude blend two different sounding songs, having a very cohesive track list in general, especially when you're DJing.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. I'm really grateful that like the first live funk show I saw was Vamp, because that's someone who can play all these different elements, but he doesn't take it too seriously either. He's not obsessed with needing to go like at this point to cue in to cue out. He just kind of reads the room and has fun. And then you got someone like BadKidsGoodPeople who's just like a mad scientist, to your point, right? Like mixing old Purple Posse, some of his wave stuff. And I think that's really like hopefully what the future is sure, we can call it a funk show or like a funk and wave, whatever you want to call it, but bringing all those sort of like subgenres in, whether it's like lo-fi, funk, I mean, some jungle, I think works really, really well at the end of a set. Coming out of funk, especially if you have some of that like Memphis cadence or those vocals in there. So it's more than just like defining it and limiting it to one genre, just kind of being open to that entire like, I don't know, like world that really opened up, I think, in a lot of credit due to SoundCloud. So
yeah,
we'll see what happens.
Definitely, especially like the golden age, like you said. Like there's so many people that came out of like the 2016 2018 era, especially like when they started, and just looking at them now, it's definitely was worth it for them, because just the growth that they've had, especially from pre-pandemic to during pandemic to post-pandemic, it definitely does show, especially the people that were able to, I wouldn't say survive, but people that just stay consistent with everything, how the turnout is, especially when it comes to like listeners at live shows in general. Like you can definitely see how many people's, it's gonna sound cliche when I say this, but how many lives have changed, especially with the songs that people make in general. Because I know some songs, especially when it comes to funk, you do get kind of emotional to it, especially when it comes to like long tracks. It's just different vibes for different songs in general, but it's just different moods when it comes to different artists. I don't know, I kind of forgot where I was going with that, but just seeing the progression when it comes to like the golden age from 2016 to 2018 versus what you hear now, it definitely shows like a bit of a maturity when it comes to the people that stay consistent, as well as the people that are also doing live shows at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, I think it's kind of like a survive or die type of thing, at least until recently, where, I mean, it still is the case. There's not much money to be made in funk. I mean, there's a couple of people who are able to do it. Takes a lot of hustle, but I think the reason you saw that development and that like maturity in a sense of sound was from these funk producers who gained, you know, a good online following, but realized they had to kind of mix it up or try a different sound or penetrate some other genres that potentially at the time were more palatable to be able to get on a festival set list, to be able to lease your own stuff. I mean, shit gets copywritten all the time when you try to upload it, let alone if you try to monetize or sell. So I think that was not a unique challenge in the funk world, but that really led people to try some other things and experiment. While in the meantime, I mean, all of the OG stuff was still really growing online, even if they kind of departed from it temporarily or took a couple, you know, pivots in what they were trying to develop as a sound so that they could do it as a living. Now it's like, again, I mean, it's crazy to say because a year, 2 years ago, I never would have thought it was possible to be able to regularly like perform and be doing like funk sets or wave sets or some of that like really underground jungle stuff that is really reminiscent of like that UK sound from years and years ago. So it's cool, and it's just more opportunities. I mean, I was talking to my manager because I'm playing at Big Dove, which is this festival in Pennsylvania, a little bit after the Ryan show. I was like, what type of stuff should I spin here? Like, I don't know what these people are expecting. He's like, just spin your stuff. Like, make it a funk set at a festival. Like, just enjoy it, which is really comforting. It's not like he was coming to me being like, yeah, like I got you on this roster. Like, good for you. I need you to start downloading an entirely different discography so that you don't stick out like a sore thumb because that type of stuff doesn't play here. Like, I mean, he's willing to put a chance on me. They're willing to put a chance on like me and like the type of sound that I'm cultivating. So I think that promoters and people who are hosting, whether it's a festival or live show, are becoming a lot more open-minded to this because, you know, the term funk is becoming somewhat more recognizable, but at the same time, of course, like we have to admit that funk is such an umbrella term for so many different things, and someone who listens to say Smokey and Vamp, like I mentioned earlier, like they might listen to like some of the future funk stuff like maybe that Katabi's put out and be like, all right, I get some elements, but like this seems like a completely different route. And I think it's better for us to keep it vague in an umbrella term, because if you try to pigeonhole it, then everything is going to end up sounding the same, you know? So
yeah, definitely true. It's also, I think it was one of the points that you just said, probably like maturing as a listener too, because I remember, I don't know where I was watching that. It definitely was on YouTube, but yesterday, this is kind of funny because I was listening to the newest Lil Uzi Spotify, like his latest album last night with a friend of mine. And it's kind of funny because while I was listening to that, I was browsing videos on YouTube about how people hated mumble rap in like 2012 to 2014 versus now, like you hear it on TikTok and you hear it everywhere, and it's sort of like everybody likes it now versus, let's say, like 6 or 7 years ago, everybody hated it or was bashing on it. And it's sort of like similar to like what your manager was saying at that time, just like trusting you with basically whatever you're spinning at the festival, and just trusting that whatever you play or whatever you're gonna spin on, that no matter what, he's entrusting you with just doing your job basically at the end of the day.
yeah, no, it's great. And again, I mean, there are people out here who've been doing like live gigs for a much longer time, and I think everyone has their kind of preference for how they build a set, how they actually execute on it. I mean, you have people like Vamp who just kind of like low pass out or like put on like that pitch knob so it fades out of track and then plays the next one. And the audience doesn't really care. I think whether it's this precise tactical transition where you're like BPM matching and like building upon it, mixing in the same key, like that's always an advantage and always great. But again, like the audience is just there to have fun and like listen to some cool stuff. So try not to take myself too seriously definitely like helps keep things going while building on that skill, because there's a big barrier to entry in my mind in terms of like being able to perform live. I mean, the hardware that we use, like the CDJ 2000s, 3000s, those are like thousands and thousands of dollars. Like the only time I ever got to practice on them, because I rented the CDJ 2000s for like $300, I think, between the mixer and then the two CDJs, and I had like 36 hours to try to like figure out how to use it, and a majority of that time was just learning how to make sure that my tracks would carry from record box to a flash drive onto the actual decks. And so it's tough, I think, to be able to fully practice and prepare and learn the hardware unless you have that money, or there are people who are building opportunities for you to actually practice on that stuff. So I think that I guess the point I'm trying to say here is that you need to have different opportunities to be able to cultivate your skills and to build other people's up, because it's not necessarily easy for a veteran DJ to go and then carry their flash drive on hardware that they've never seen before. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel you on that. And it's also like, to your point, no one's perfect. I've already learned this, like, especially growing up, especially like struggles in life in general. Like, nobody's perfect. Like, the best thing to do for yourself, especially, is just to enjoy everything that's happening. Because at the end of the day, like, the hardest critic, I guess, is yourself, because you're basically the hardest person on yourself in general. That's with anything. So if you can have fun, especially with something that you enjoy, I think that's a win-win to me. Just imagine if you didn't do anything, like the what if, basically, this like a what if scenario. Like, what if I didn't do this? What if I didn't release this track? What if I didn't start producing? It's sort of like a what if I didn't do anything. And I know for a fact that I'm gonna basically reject the thought of me performing at a show as well, because I've just been it doesn't sound like something I would it doesn't sound like something I would do, just because I'm such a normal person in general. But just seeing people that it's like seeing you, Saint, and basically anybody that's sort of like a local performer in general in the DMV, it's kind of funny seeing people that have the similar personality as me, or people that are just as nervous as me, spin and do an entire set show.
Yeah, dude, I know what you mean. And like, never say never, you know? Like, my goal was to get to 1,000 SoundCloud followers and then get one track into Ryan Celsus's Trapping in Japan. Like, anything else after that, if I even would hit those goals, I was like, great, I'll take it. I'm not trying to make a living out of this, because I feel like that would totally eat away at my creative side. There are other people who are more goal oriented, but yeah, I mean, stuff just ends up happening. You just got to put stuff out there and get to know people and see where that goes, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's good to have goals, but not make it. I think once it turns into like a full-time gig, or like something that isn't turning into a hobby anymore, that's when it's sort of like there's more pressure. I definitely see it with a lot of people, especially if they're doing it full-time, like being full-time creatives in general. It's stressful. It's really stressful. It's sort of like, instead of working like a 40-hour-a-week job, it's sort of like you're working 24/7.
Yeah, I mean, some people thrive on that. Like, Odd One Out, like, pretty much fully like commits his time and effort to building out his music career, and then of course, like, he's great with graphic design, just channeling into as many creative outlets as possible. And like, while that might work for him, I don't know if it would necessarily would work for me. And so I think everyone's different. But yeah, me personally, I agree with you that I think when you need to put food on the table and your work in FL Studio is what you're relying on, me personally, like, I would hate to hear that sound when it boots up, you know?
It's like, oh
Everyone's
shit,
different.
I need to pump a track out today. It's
Yeah,
definitely
exactly.
definitely different strokes for different people too. Like, it definitely could work for him, and it definitely is working for him. It just might get stressful long term, and it might not show for people. It might just show for yourself personally, like if you're in a room alone versus like putting on a different persona, especially when you're out and about with other people. Like, you definitely don't know like what people might be going through and the stress that they're going through. So mainly what I'm trying to say is, like, I definitely don't judge, and definitely have fun with everything, and keep it, I would say, keep it as a hobby. Because I was actually gonna ask this before, like, if you still see funk or just producing as a hobby versus something that's full time. Like, I was gonna segue into that earlier, but we both just got sidetracked, and we were just talking about just like future plans or keeping it as a hobby in general.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to talk about, so I get that. But I don't know, man. I mean, I'll see where it takes me. This whole low pressure environment thing is really going great for me. Again, like, everyone's different. I definitely want to do as many shows as possible and put out as much music out there. And right now there's no conflict between my, like, 9 to 5 and me getting out there, which I'm really thankful about. something that I wouldn't know how to answer until like I was put in that position, you know. Again, I never thought I'd be doing live shows, and I give so much props and just I'm super grateful for my manager just like kind of betting on me, you know? Like the day of my like first gig, like that happened because he was like, "Hey, there's this guy Max, he runs Para Presents. They throw a lot of shows at a Flash Club in DC. It's like send them one of your tracks to be in their mix." I didn't really know like what that meant because the formalities are super different than on the Phonk realm where it's kind of like just crank out a track, blast it out on SoundCloud, and you're done. Like
Yeah.
within
It's a lot easier.
yeah, within like the bass music scene, like people are like reaching out to these distributors, like they're super tactical and like the way that they cue their releases. It's a different world, but yeah, like I guess Max liked what I sent to him. And was like, "Hey, I actually have a spot like a week from today if you want to like mix at Flash," which like I love Flash in DC. I've always gone there for shows. I was thought that was surreal, and like the day of the show, I'm talking to my manager. He's like, "So like, is this your first time ever like mixing live?" And I was like, "Yeah," and I'm like new to it. And I'm like trying to like hold my composure. That first set was pretty rocky. I mean, it seems like everyone in the audience enjoyed it, but it's like skydiving, right? Like you can plan as much for a dive, but until you take that jump the first time, you don't really know how it's gonna go, how you're gonna feel. But once you do a couple of jumps, something that was like super scary. I mean, you see these people going out back on a plane like after landing with their parachute just the next day. So I guess that's the best analogy I could put it as. But
Yeah, and like another analogy that anybody that's probably gonna listen to this, and like I don't know when I'm gonna release this, but it's definitely gonna be like in the next week or two. Definitely before the actual first show at 8:10. It's similar to like having your first release, or just like an example could be like anybody that has done a tutorial on like how to make funk in general. It's definitely like a leap of faith. Like names that I can think of: 127, Zap Beats, and like nowadays Shinzo. And especially like I just want to give a shout out to Teddy for real, because like he was definitely like an inspiration to like just me creating content, or just like me creating different formats, or like this format of like this video right now. Like I definitely get inspiration from a lot of people, and I think that's definitely a key thing for people in the community to do. Like I think we said it earlier too, it's like you can have different bits and pieces from different producers. Like someone can have something from Barry Main, somebody can have something from Odd, somebody can have a graphic. I think Big Problem Mac, I think Mac.
yeah, he's great. Yeah.
Like you can definitely get inspiration as long as like you put your own spin on it. Having all these people that you can talk to, or that you can DM, and everybody's open-minded to everything, just basically make your style, or just make your own style, and still be inspired by these other people. They're definitely producers, they're definitely different content creators that are in this community that I get inspiration from, and probably producers that you definitely get inspiration from when it comes to either doing your DJ sets, or when it comes to producing, like you said earlier. It's just such a great thing, versus just bashing each other or like putting each other down. Like I definitely haven't felt that at all, and I'm still thankful and I'm glad that I haven't felt that at all, and I'm hoping I never feel that ever. But it's just such a great thing that we all band together and we just lift each other up, basically, especially when it comes to like the collaborative aspect.
Yeah, and to your point on just the whole community aspect, I think that the challenges as well as kind of like the windfalls within Phonk, I wouldn't say that they're exclusively unique, but I think that they're like particularly true. And I guess what I'm referring to is, one, there's no money behind Phonk right now, right? Like no one's out here to make money. Real, I mean, everyone wants to make a living, of course, but no one's picking up FL Studio saying, "Oh, I know for sure I can comfortably live off of just cranking Phonk out on SoundCloud," right? That's just, it's a big leap there. So basically everything that's driving this genre, it's all brick and mortar, it's all community based. I mean, when you have people who are out here doing tutorials, which maybe they want to grow their page, but they're doing it because they love the genre. You have Teddy Color out in the UK who's mixing on like Bad Radio, for example, and interviewing these people out of general interest. You have people like, you know, Mindless Designs, you have Big Problem Mac, these people who like, sure, like, I mean, their commissions is pretty damn affordable, but like they're doing it because they love the graphic design element and that multimedia component. You have all these different channels and different elements around the community, like building out really interest first and money, I think, as a second priority. and that's what's really kept it around and growing, which I think is great. Again, it's just generally I think that that's what makes a lot of subculture movements kind of die off, is it's unsustainable and interest fades. But people could say funk is dying. It's kind of just the opposite. If you look at how many people like mixed it, if you look at like even probably on Google Trends, the amount of people who use the term,
it's definitely increased. Like I could probably pull something up like after this, like 2016 and 2017 it wasn't that much of a thing because it was basically just on SoundCloud. But nowadays, like, you see the word funk not just from TikTok, but just also people getting interested in wondering, what is this genre and why do I keep hearing it? It's definitely something that people want answers to, or like people have a ton of questions for them, versus let's say 4 or 5 years ago. It definitely piques a lot of people's interest nowadays.
Yeah, I just pulled up the term funk in Google Trends. It's a pretty cool infographic. You definitely see that rise, oddly enough, really starting to like curve off and break away in like 2021. But I guess it depends the time frame you're looking at it in. I know a lot of that too is because of like the whole Russian hard bass music or whatever that built into drift funk and all that stuff. But that's, no matter like how you want to split it with like drift funk, like that isn't an issue unique to like this one subculture. That happens across every subculture basically, is this struggle to try to like maintain the definition that you find authentic. But the more that you try to like define it and put parameters around it, the more you're restricting the potential, and the growth and the evolution there. So
Yeah, man, I'm okay. I'm probably gonna be off script when I say this too, but like, dude, like that what is funk video was so difficult to do. Like,
mhm.
that was probably like the most time consuming video I ever did. It was just crazy how many different sections of this genre is, and like how many people have a different definition of it. Like I definitely have a different definition of it just because I listen to people like Studier and Vamp, but just seeing like different comments, or like seeing different people that came from like Lost Century or Diversed, or people that are actually on the Spotify playlist that I've never even heard of. And it's just so weird, just the amount of, not even the amount of comments for like, there aren't that many comments surprisingly bashing the video or anything. It's just so difficult to get like any type of information that I don't even know off the top of my head to actually create that video. That video took probably like a good solid month or two of just researching everything, and let alone the 𝖒𝖏𝖏 video helped me out so much with that. But just like in general, it was so difficult to go off of just like the Wikipedia pages and all the news articles in general, because it was really time consuming just to figure out how I was able to coordinate that video, because I have a different definition. You probably have a different definition too. It's just like everybody started at a different section of the genre in general, and it was so weird to make it basically universal at the end of the day.
Yeah, I remember, I think you were talking to me about it when you were setting off to try and do that. And I mean, you did a great job along with Yokai and what Puni put out there. What makes that so challenging, I think, is what brings so much value to the video, right? Someone asks you, what is a bird? That you can make that video with a super general overview in about a minute and explain what a bird is, right? But the way I refer to funk, or how I define it, and again, this is just me, is more of that approach of like, you know it when you see it, right? Like, funk is cool. It's ironic. It's dark, but also kind of comedic, if you will. Of course, you have that like Memphis inspiration, that kind of SoundCloud sound to it, the rough cut. But again, I kind of like it deferring to like, you know it when you see it type of mindset, versus that then some sort of, I don't know, empirical formula, right?
Yeah, definitely. Like everybody has their own selection, I would say. That's what makes it so interesting, because I remember this one time, this is actually funny. So I introduced somebody to funk, and I introduced like at least a good percentage of my friends to funk almost every single time I hang out with them, because that's literally all I play in my car, and I'm always the designated driver. So they're like, whoa, bro, what's this track? And then I have to pull it up on Spotify. But I introduced my friend to funk, and the first thing that he did was search it on Spotify, and he saw the playlist. And like we have like this funny like comedic style where it's basically dark, but we don't take each other seriously. And I was like, bro, I'm disowning you as one of my friends because why you listening to this garbage? And then he jokingly said, I don't care. This is my music. I'm listening to whatever I want. I'm just thinking. And then for some reason we got into such a heated argument just because like I listened to a different subsection of Phonk versus him listening to the actual official Phonk playlist. But at the end of the day, like we came to an agreement. It's like you have a different definition, I have a different definition. It's like I don't care what music that you listen to, we're still gonna be friends at the end of the day. So it really didn't matter at all. It's just kind of funny that we had a whole argument because of that, and we basically laughed it off and we just went our separate ways. And I thought that was such a great thing in general. It's like everybody has a different definition, everybody started somewhere different. It's just funny to me that a year or two ago I would have been like, oh, I hate drift funk, or I hate cowboy aggressive house funk, or whatever the hell everybody calls it nowadays, versus now it's like I really don't care anymore. It's like I fought a good fight. At the end of the day, like I'm gonna just listen to whatever the hell I want to listen to.
Yeah, no, you bring up a good point though, right? I mean, there's always growing pains, especially like, and I've harped on it probably too many times already, but like the whole point of the subculture, of any subculture, right, is building out some sort of underground, some sort of resistance, some sort of pivot away from maybe the conventional, whether you're thinking audibly, whether it's about the process of releasing, the personalization and the ownership versus going through a label. Like when you don't have those clear-cut parameters, there are inevitably going to be growing pains, especially as you get new players into the market. But yeah, I mean, I think over time, like you'll see the Phonk playlist on Spotify begin to get more precise and begin to kind of call a spade and a heart, right? But yeah, I mean, like me personally, like the whole drift funk scene, like I mean there's some stuff where I'm just like, this is so uncreative and like repetitive and formulaic. But then dude, like I'll just be like scrolling on like fucking TikTok and just say, ooh, fuck, like okay, yeah, like like I'm
it's
supposed
like the
to
same expression. It's like why am I supposed to hate this? It sounds so good.
yeah, like so it's like not either or, it's both, and everything gets sorted out over time. I mean, the very fact that the term funk is more centered in people's minds than it was that they'd ever heard before because of like that whole Russian influence, especially of like the whole drift funk component. Like sure, it's kind of a pain that like that might be the first thing that comes to people's mind as a heuristic for the genre, but at the same time it's like, would they even ever use the word funk like in a conversation with someone else? So again, growing pains, I think that gets sorted out. And I think keeping it low pressure, you know it when you see it. The one pet peeve that does get to me, and I'm fine being vocal about this, is when someone like uses the term funk, or this could go for any other sort of subgenre, right? Like they're riding on some sort of term or mindset or branding, whatever it may be, but doing it within isolation away from like contributing and fostering for the community, right? And I guess more specifically what I'm thinking of is like an artist who's going out and using the term funk or using the term junglers or cross, but not really like part of the community, where they're so siloed off that it's really self-serving. And again, to each their own, because there's nothing at the end of the day that's really wrong with that. It's more of just like the peeve of like, well, you know, if you're going to come to the door and like build this, you know, we have an open door for you to walk in and be part of the community, right? I try to keep things vague because it's never good to call other people out, right? But my thought is like, I mean, what makes funk so powerful is already what I've touched on, which I think is that community element, the looseness to it, where I mean, if you're gonna get into FL and like start cranking stuff out, like there's so many other people out there who like want to network with you, want to help uplift you, you know, like don't make this a kind of like zero sum game, you know, because that's what's worked so well for us.
Yeah, definitely. Very communal, very communal. Like you've probably heard me say community like at least a dozen times in like the last hour. But
Well, that's
it's
how
just
every
so true.
conversation about it goes, right? Like you're not the only one who I feel like always nods to that. I totally agree with you.
I think that's everything. We've been going for like an hour. Like what other questions do you have basically, or like what else do you want to like go over if you're interested or have any questions that we haven't gone over?
Yeah, I don't think I have any questions by any means. I guess like this is just aside from like the interviews. Like I used to do the editing for my friends' podcasts, especially like during COVID and stuff, and like it's annoying, but it's pretty easy to just chop around and figure out the gems that you want to pull out of it. So I think we covered a lot, which is great. You know, I mean, there is a lot to talk about, but I think we hit all the bases, and it'll be cool. Like what comes out of Ryan's tour. Like I said, I mean, if everything goes well and it's really looking like people are super excited about it, promoters, of course, are doing this to foster community, but they'll also be seeing dollar signs where I think you're going to see a lot more live shows starting to pop up, which fingers crossed, you know, that'll be really good for everyone. Again, it's not zero sum, it's kind of everyone uplifting this community together, so
Yeah, and
should be good.
it's also probably gonna like benefit a lot of smaller artists because it's definitely gonna show them like you're definitely worth something versus just working at this for free in general.
Yeah, yeah.
That's like basically the only way I can actually say it, but it's like reaping your rewards, I guess, in a manner or in a sense. But yeah, I'm just glad for anybody that is gonna go out and do like a funk show in general in like the next year or two. Well, not even just funk, just if they're doing a hip hop show or just definitely like any type of genre in general.
Yeah,
Definitely a lot of people that definitely need to get into doing different shows. Doesn't even matter the genre at the end of the day.
yeah. I mean, the amount of people who've bought controllers in the last year to start to figure out how to DJ. I mean, there's a lot of potential. There's a lot more people than there were a year ago who are looking to get out there and like bring it to the live scene. So everything's kind of growing in tandem, even though you have these little islands, if you will. It's good.
Yeah, I think the last show I saw that wasn't like a back when live show on YouTube, I think it was Versi, and I think he had like an hour set, and like his visuals were really awesome. I can't remember like how long ago it was. I think it was probably like a month and a half ago, but I saw it on my feed and I was like, oh, this is someone that's different, or like this is someone that I know and he's doing a live set on YouTube, so I'm just go up and just give him a shout out. It was such a great thing because like virtual shows are definitely, I think there was like 2 or 3 virtual shows that I've seen in like the last month. It's definitely kind of surprising that I never even thought of that until it actually popped up. Like there's definitely different communities and there's definitely different pieces of the community that basically can do different things or that they can bring something to the table.
Yeah, send me those too, because I do think that is a cool opportunity to build out, right? I mean, like people stream DJ mixes on Twitch and stuff. I mean, the first person who ever fucked with my stuff was Night Swim Radio, and they just kind of like do these weekly or monthly installments from their bedroom or their living room. And I thought it was the most insane thing to hear not only like my music played in some other person's platform, but also hearing some of the other artists that later on I found out like are also part of the genre. Like Nuclear was in there, Zap Beats was in there. You know, it's cool, and I would love to do like virtual stuff too. It's just PCs are expensive too, right? Like, I mean, I have a laptop, but to make sure that that shit doesn't sink, you got to have some like good horsepower behind it. So
Definitely, like starting out, you probably only need like a $50 Dell laptop, but if you like, you could basically start on like a potato. I'm not even gonna lie, especially when it comes to like just starting out on either FL Studio, Logic, or just Ableton or anything. Like you definitely don't need a lot of hardware or software to get started. It's just like being consistent at the end of the day.
yeah, I know what you mean. And you've done a great job of building out like that YouTube page. Again, even just having the whole documentarian angle is huge, and it's a lot of value, I think, for people who are interested in what's going on. Because years ago, neither of us would have known where to start, right? Like,
Yeah, that's definitely true. And just getting inspiration from other people. I think my biggest inspiration was definitely like, it's funny how my name on YouTube started with tech, but that's how I started. Like I was just interested in different tech channels, just MKBHD, I think, and then just branching out to my interest being in music and then going from tech to music, and just it's just so weird like how everything meets a different path in life and you just follow basically a similar dream or a similar path in general. Because I honestly didn't think I was going to be making funk videos a year or two ago.
yeah, yeah, I know what you mean. It's cool how it kind of all happens unpredictably, but like in stride. So it's cool.
Yeah. Okay, this is gonna be more like a question that I feel like you could definitely answer because you're probably the only person that might have an answer for this. How did you link up, or how did you join Masterminds? And I think we talked about Marijuana Mafia. I think the last time we talked, But I just want to get like, I just want to know like how that actually happened, because you did talk about how you listen to different collectives in general and how listening to them got you to listen to other collectives like Holy Mob and Purple Posse in general. So I just want to know like how, like, did somebody recruit you, or like did somebody ask you to join, or like did you want to join in general?
Yeah, no, that's a good point, because that's something like when I first kind of started like reaching out and trying to get to know the community, I was scratching my head about. But I guess the way it worked was kind of around that point where I realized, like networking isn't just for the sake of networking. Like everyone is kind of like-minded and in interest to develop their own sounds and evolve and challenge each other. And I think really what it was is like one of the first people I collaborated with, at least like remotely, was Milo's, who he I think as a school he stopped putting out as much work, but he was part of Scent Boys and he had like a voice tag in it, and I'm like, oh, like Scent Boys, that's really cool. And then I like kind of went to their page and I saw these great artists. I was like, holy shit, like this is just like an entire collective of people like-minded trying to build out something. These tapes are super cool. So I reached out to Scent Boys and they were like we're not taking anyone, but I think it's really, I guess they were inactive at the time. Again, I was super, super small in terms of a like presence on streaming platforms and social media, but Stupid Beats in the meantime, like that kid along with like Freddie Confetti, to me in my mind, they like came out of nowhere. Like all of a sudden I saw one post about Stupid Beats, and then all of a sudden multiple posts. All of a sudden like people that I follow on Instagram are all collaborating with him, and the kid was hungry. He reached out to me and was like, do you want to collaborate on something? And I was like, sure. All of a sudden he like builds out Masterminds. I was like, yo, this is actually good timing. I'm looking to join a collective. I'm still starting out, like if you will, in terms of a presence, but I think I can be of value. And he had just basically started Masterminds with what was in his first few tapes, like really collaborating and networking closely with other artists. And I think he just realized like, oh shit, like, well, we kind of have this community starting to grow. Let's slap a name on it. I know Big Problem Mac can do like the dirtiest multimedia edits, and he's a great dirt artist as well. Like it kind of on his end started organically, and then I kind of took note when I was just starting to know him, and it worked out great. Like again, I mean, I mentioned I keep things casual, but having someone like him or having a community of people who are like, when is the next tape dropping? Like, hey, let's start building out a kit. Oh, I have this work in progress. I don't know what to do with it. Is anyone interested? It just gives you this like continual feed of people holding you like very gently accountable, as well as like throwing different ideas your way. And I love it. I mean, Marijuana Mafia is sort of similar, where me and Blunted, like we'd worked together for a couple years, and that was literally just like DMing and sending stuff back and forth. And everything we were making, I thought was like super, super cool. Like he's been around for a long ass amount of time. Like I consider that guy an OG. And I was shocked when he wanted to work with me. Like, and then he ended up just being the nicest dude ever. And he kept throwing in the tag like Marijuana Mafia, and I'm like, like there's no Marijuana Mafia out here. Like, what is this? Just his tag? Like, what's he trying to do with it?
Yeah,
And then we
because
started.
remember,
Yeah.
I do remember that EP that you did, and I was like, Marijuana Mafia, is he like part of a crew? And then I looked at his SoundCloud and I was like, there's no collective for this, but is this just a thing for him? And then like I kid you not, like 2 months later, like all I saw was Marijuana Mafia, and then you guys dropped the tape.
Yeah, this is like so selfish, but like that collab EP me and him did, I feel like that was the start of Marijuana Mafia. And basically a couple months later, after just talking back and forth, he was like, yo, so like I got these other artists who are really down to build a collective together, which is something I had suggested to him like a year before, but at the time neither of us had the bandwidth or the interest in building out something formal. And he just had been talking to a lot of like French artists, which again, I talked about like that great link that 𝖒𝖏𝖚𝖚𝖚𝖚 is, but like it's a nice glue between people like me and Trevor, and then we have one other great producer out in Brussels, but it's primarily like a lot of these French homies, right? And he just decided it was time to do it. And those kids are like so damn hungry, dude. Like they're either on Discord or they're like in the studio or they're going to a show to do something, like, which is always like a really good sign. And it's comforting because I can be sort of on autopilot. Hell, I don't speak French, so half the messages go over my head, and I just will like touch base with one of them and be like, yo, so like, what are we trying to do? What's going on? And they have it like like all of these guidelines and benchmarks and stuff. But the other part that I really love about that is that the way that I feel like shows are done out in like France and like the EU is very different than what we've seen, and kind of what I had envisioned Phonk would evolve into a bit more. Like to your point, like when we went to that Vamp show, or like even some of the sets that I've done, like you have a legit top-notch sound system. You have someone in the back managing audio. You have a visual artist queuing up logos and like other animations on screen. You have this like legit venue. There's a lot of money behind it. There's a lot of effort. It's like super polished. And that was something I was like really intimidated about and really surprised like happening out here, was like how somewhat professional but also casual it was. Out in like France, I feel like they kind of have these like smaller, more like DIY venues. And that's a bit of a generalization, but I think a lot of these French shows with like 𝖒𝖝𝖗𝖚𝖝𝖋𝖎𝖝, it's not like they have this huge concert venue by any means. They're just like a couple homies who like scrapped together some stuff and then just made it happen. And I think both settings are equally valuable, and bring out different elements, you know? So it's really cool to see what they're doing out there. And if I had all the money in the world, I'd love to be able to like get out there and like just see what they're doing and talk with them and network. So who knows? I mean, hopefully a year from now, like if we're at the same trajectory, it's going to be pretty crazy, like networking and talking and see like where this road is taking us. It's some good stuff happening.
Yeah, definitely. Like there's like 3 things that I definitely want to happen in like the next 2 years. That's I know for a fact that even though I'm not going to be producing or like making as many videos as I want, or like doing any of this stuff consistently, because it is difficult, and it definitely takes more time, mainly time consuming. It's not stressful. Just flying out and hanging out with everybody is definitely a goal of probably both mine and yours, because it definitely is going to take a lot of time, and people don't talk about the money in the background. That's probably a big benefiting factor, because I remember going to Colorado, like that was even though it was like across the country, it was expensive. It's just a lot of different benefiting factors that are really dependent on whether or not you can make it to a show or not. I would definitely enjoy seeing a lot more people both in the Phonk community as well. It definitely is going to take a lot of time. That's just one inevitable factor that both of us are probably going to face within like the next year or two. But one thing that I keep saying this all the time, and I keep saying it in like, I think Brian's Discord, or basically in the Underground, which is basically the tour name. The end goal that I want to see, and I'll even help when it comes to like promoting, and I'll definitely like interview as many people that I possibly can, or like I can have different types of videos or different types of styles of videos to help out when it comes to both branding and promoting different people or different artists, or just talking to people in general. I just want there to be basically a Phonk festival. Like that's my ultimate end goal. That's my ultimate end goal. I don't care if it happens 5 years from now. I don't care if it happens 10 years from now. I'm hoping it happens less than 5 years, but like it's just a wish and a hope. Like that's my ultimate end goal, and just seeing different artists or have different people that share this one genre in common with one another, and like we can all just join together in one simple place, or whether it be in America or whether it be in Europe. It really doesn't matter like where the venue is. Like if we can all just join together for once in a Phonk festival, I feel like I'll be able to accomplish everything in life. Like that sounds like a huge stretch or like a huge milestone, but then again, you don't know what life has in store for anything. So yeah, I'm gonna just keep that in the back of my head. And I just want to put on record, I wasn't the first person to say this, but definitely on YouTube I probably hopefully am.
No, like I think it is doable. I think this year is kind of like a proof of concept type of thing. Like I hate to think about business or use business terms to try to tie to it, but at the end of the day, like all these events are people putting up their money because they believe in something. To your point, like you got to go out to Denver, but I think you crashed it with 𝖒𝖝𝖗𝖝𝖋𝖚, man. Like people are out here accommodating each other. A couple people from the Phonk Around folks like reached out that they're coming out here. When Trevor went down to Texas, I'm pretty sure he crashed at Daddy Dirty's place, and like more everyone's out here for everyone. Like especially like on the East Coast, I think like we all grew up kind of being like have some skepticism about people who are too friendly, right? Or like if someone's willing to go like the extra mile for you, like, and you don't know them, like strangers with candy, dog, right? Like once you kind of like get to know, I mean, everyone's really like-minded and trying to build out whatever funk is. Like again, everyone has a different definition or might not know what to explain it as, but I think like keeping that mindset of just openness and being super welcome to help host others, to bring other people out, taking risks on people just because you like listen to them and have this whole vision for like what might be for the genre. Like it's all healthy optimism, right? So I think something big could come out of it. And to your point about like doing like a festival or something, like definitely recommend people go listen to Ryan getting interviewed by Teddy Color on his latest Phonk show installment, because he kind of talked about what he would like to see one day, and it's like brings in these multimedia elements, like, these different themes, and it's exciting to hear other people talk about it. I think every single day we're all thinking it's more and more possible. Again, never thought I'd be able to do a show, and when my manager over a year ago was like, my goal is to do a full-fledged funk show in Baltimore, I was like, great, like let me know when that happens, right? Like I didn't think that was possible by any means. And just like at the same time, he started connecting with the funk around, find out people at the Black Box, and they started doing shows out there. And at this point it's really like, you know, sky is the limit to some sort, because there's not a high ceiling in funk, dude. Like
That's
it's not
true.
like
You can literally get started tomorrow, just with like one tutorial and like one drum kit.
yeah, like it's not like the biggest funk artist is going to be the one who's opening at Coachella yet, right? But if you look at like UK garage or garage, however you want to say it, or some of these other genres that were founded like sort of this underground element, like it's crazy what's been kind of permeating at some of these bigger festivals. So maybe one day. I mean, I think the last point to make there is just you have people like Smokestacks, who's this super talented producer. He DJs a lot, but he also has like a second alias of Research Chemicals, and that's really dedicated to like lo-fi and funk, and like seeing that intersectionality between like what he traditionally makes and what might be more conventional at a festival scene. Those people who listen to that stuff are also seeking out like new ideas and new genres like funk. Like again, I was surprised how many people had even heard the term when I did my first set and I was trying to explain to people what I was about to play. I really underestimated, I think, the interest in it. The fact that someone would give me the deck for an hour to just do whatever the fuck I wanted. It's been surreal, I guess, right? It's like, are you sure? Like, okay.
It's definitely a rocky road. Like like I can definitely tell that you always have fun every single time that I saw you at a show, but I can definitely tell like versus your first show to probably even your most recent show that you definitely improved, like, and you still have fun while doing it.
Yeah, that community element, right? Like if I didn't have Saint Pond and Yarvist, who he mixes a lot of like drum and bass, jungle, but also funk, like they've been a huge help. You didn't get to see my first set ever at Flash, dude. I was like Stonewall Jackson. I didn't look at the audience probably the entire time. Like the person before me, Shrezda, he's also affiliated with affiliated with Head Nod. Like I come up to the roof and he's just like chopping between different tracks and elements. Like the crowd is like super busy. Someone's like, I've never seen Flash Rooftop so crowded. Like lucky for me, the headliner was like 20 minutes, a half hour late to getting to his set. So like I had this huge fucking audience and I couldn't look up once, dude. I was just like, I don't even know how my music sounds on big speakers. Like that was a rocky like skydive, like I mentioned before, but I guess like people were good with it. Can only get better. Like let's not be too hard on ourselves here. It's not like BBC Radio's scratching at the bits to interview me, you know?
Yeah.
If I screw up and I don't beat match properly or something sounds out of key, the worst I have is some dude who's probably super inebriated by that point complaining to his girlfriend. Like just keep it moving with a smile on our faces. And again, those back-to-backs, like I've learned so much from like some of my other friends who are way more well versed behind a deck. But yeah, I mean, I'm going into that Ryan Celsius show, which is gonna be unbelievable. I mean, that's like I called it my quinceañera, even though I'm not the main person. Like everyone, people are coming down from New York, people are coming up from Virginia.
Texas,
Um,
probably Denver too.
yeah.
I think I don't even know if I can bet on this, but there might be somebody flying from Europe. I don't know for a fact. I can't promise that either, but there's definitely a lot of a lot of ears on the first show. And I think there's probably, hold on, let me see if I could pull it up right now, the schedule right now. So definitely at the 810 and the Black Box, those are probably going to be the biggest shows, and then plenty of other names both on the West Coast and down south. So that Texas show is probably going to be extremely lit. I know that for a fact. They're doing, I think, 2 shows in Texas, and then the rest are gonna be basically West Coast, so like California, Washington, and Denver.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hyped for like the Northeast and Northwest shows. You have 𝖒𝖏𝖚𝖚𝖝𝖚𝖃 and you have 𝖒𝖏𝖏𝖚𝖃 on the same roster for like a Buffalo one, I think. Like,
Yeah,
I think those
just
ones,
added it. I think they just added it
yeah.
like a week or 2 ago. Yeah.
Yeah, and like that's the thing is like, I mean, in Texas and Colorado specifically, they've started to realize like they can mix this stuff and people will show up and pay attention. I mean, for me and many other artists, like probably even you too, like my biggest cities right now are like Houston, Dallas, and Denver. Like if I look at like streaming, what I'm hoping and like I'm cautiously optimistic about is like the show in New York, the show, or I guess there's gonna be, forget if Brooklyn got announced or not, but out here there hasn't been as much of that genre, so it's newer and fresher. But because there's been such a limited amount of shows, then maybe people are more motivated to come out. Like Bodega Cat might come down from New York to see the show. Odd One Out is coming up with his girlfriend, and they're vending at the show, which will be dope. So they're going to be selling like Phonk Around and Find Out merch, some Mastermind stuff.
Yeah,
I'm sure
gonna be copping. I'm definitely gonna cop a Masterminds and a Phonk Around one, because I keep seeing you with that hoodie, and I'm like, that shit's tough. I just want to get one so badly.
I'm corny as shit, dog. I'm wearing that to like every single set until like Masterminds is like somewhat recognizable. Like least I can do, because Odd One Out put that together, and the logo was done by Big Problem Max. So again, like maybe it's a little cheesy to like wear that excessively like every set I do, but why not? And it's a great logo. The Y2K concept is like so overdone, but like if you do it right, it does stand out, I think. I mean, I love that logo. So
I could definitely tell. I could definitely tell you like the logo, and it does look cool. It definitely looks really cool. Like it's probably like is as clean as like the Holy Mob logo. That's like the only comparison that I can have. Like it just looks clean. It just looks clean, and you could definitely fit it on a shirt.
Yeah, man, like Mac does a good job, dude. I think my manager reached out, I think, to me, just being like, hey, like we need someone to do the flyer for the show. And like of course, like top of mind were Big Problem Mac and Mindless Designs. And I think that either Ryan's group or the Phonk Around group liked Mac's work so much they commissioned him for like a couple of the other stops. Like that kid like runs in silence, man. He's so gifted, not just with music but with graphic design. I feel like he's got like a stranglehold now on what it means to have a Phonk cover. So I hope to meet up with him one day, and what Mindless Designs does too. Super incredible.
Yeah, definitely. Like, man, it's just so many people that are so talented and so many different facets of not just music but just being creative in general. It's funny how you can see one person be so good at music, and also, oh, they do their own logos and they do their own cover art. That's wild as shit. It's just so many different facets to just be creative in general.
Well, give yourself a pat on the back too, right? You produce, you throw out content on YouTube. I mean, it's a lot of work. It's not everyone who can do multiple things like that. So
yeah,
but
it's probably because like I'm like similar to like when you said being self-conscious, not self-conscious, but like your first show, like how I said earlier, your biggest critic. You can always get better. It's weird just popping out of a bubble that you don't know what's gonna happen. And it's sort of like, even every single video, it was like, what if, or like I can't like I'm gonna be like, what if this doesn't get any views or anything? And that's sort of like a big reason like why I stopped uploading a month or so ago, and I just went to like the AMV stuff. But I definitely do want to go back. Huh?
Like it eats people up, man. I mean, I know people who are like super talented producers who are just starting to feel comfortable to put their stuff out, and like I don't want to be like, hey man, like, you know, you got to take the hard road, because that isn't the case for everyone. But like, dude, I was putting stuff out since like 2017, and like I don't think anyone, and still very few, have heard my name until like, I don't know, Ryan Celsius was nice enough to like put me into a mix and then make a post about it. That dude uplifts people tremendously, and like I think that's why we need to stick to that whole community element. Is like, I can't do it by myself. You can't. Like we all love whatever this is, and like just keep it moving and pass the buck to people, because we all kind of grow together rather than fighting each other for a limited share of voice, because Funk's gonna die if there's a set ceiling and that's it, you know.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny, like, man, I remember the first time you said that Ryan was from like the DMV area, and I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah, no, I was scratching my head too, but it's cool, and it's a challenge, but it's also kind of nice that, like, I mean, out west, I think a lot of places have a lot of producers like that network who can also DJ and mix, so it's easy to put stuff together. But out here on the East Coast, it's a little bit more quiet, right? Like, there's not too many of us artists who are putting stuff out regularly, let alone like ready and willing to do a live show, and that's multiplying by the day. So it'll look very different as time goes on.
Yeah, people definitely have like their eyes on places like New York or places like Florida versus, oh, have you heard of this producer in North Carolina? Have you heard of this producer in Georgia? We kind of fly under the radar versus what people actually know about us. It's crazy the amount of talent that's just in Maryland. Like, I can't name that many artists, but there are definitely people that come to mind. Like, the only person I can think of is like Logic, and I'm just thinking right now, it's like Logic is from Maryland. He has a few songs that reference Maryland in general, and it kind of shocks me the fact that this dude was literally raised in the same state as me, and he's just talented in general.
Yeah, the reason I went to University of Maryland was because he shot a music video there. It was the dumbest fucking reason. It's like, whoa, this campus looks so cool. At the time, I was like such a Logic fan. Anything like 𝖲𝖝𝖶, obviously. Like, now, a lot of those tracks that I thought were like super cool in high school are some really cheesy tracks, not Logic specific. I'm thinking about some other like artists I've downloaded, but it's like anything else, right? It's cool to have a community that uplifts each other, and I think that there's a lot of work we need to do over here in the DMV, because I think the Virginia folks and the DC folks and the Baltimore folks, this isn't really pertaining to funk or any of the other genres I've mentioned. I think more in general, especially with the rap scene, are super siloed off, where they're fighting each other for crumbs rather than really like networking and collaborating to like uplift everything all together. I mean, Michigan's like the perfect opposite example. I mean, there's a lot of beef between different people, but there's so much talent that comes out of there. And that comes from, I think, the intention and investment and drive. So
yeah, that's definitely true. I don't know. This is like definitely doesn't have to deal with funk, but definitely like the Flint style is so different. It is so different. It's like you take it serious, but just the way that they flow is just funny.
Yeah, I mean, think about like the origins of hip hop, where it was like very like soulful, like kind of had this nice like funk element to it, where it was really like step and repeat or call and repeat, excuse me. And then all of a sudden you had these people coming out who were like really sample heavy with like a darker twist on it, and you had gangster rap, and then you had, you know, what we grew up in, which is like that whole like 𝖲𝖝𝖶 element of rappers, where people like realized how to rap in more complex cadences, or their rhyme scheme was more complex. And in my mind, I think with rap in general, like, we've kind of approached that aspect of like, yeah, like this person can rap the fastest, or this person can have the most double entendres, where like a lot of that has been like saturated, where really what I listen to hip hop for now is like that cadence, you know, that flow. I think that that's what's reviving a lot of Memphis and Houston artists, you know, a lot of Atlanta artists, but also that whole like mumble rap that even I used to knock on it, and now I think is just like so damn creative. What these people can do like phonetically, someone might call it lazy, but like I think it's all intentional, and it's really just to curate this whole different vibe, because we've technologically seen what's possible. It's like, now what's another way to like angle this or to look at this that is unconventional?
Yeah, that's definitely true. And it's also, I think the older I got, the more I realized how much storytelling is in like different formats of rapping in general. Even with I'll even give this example like in funk in general. Like, when you hear a tape in Spotify versus on SoundCloud, it's totally two different stories. Like,
Yeah.
I think personally the best person when it comes to storytelling would have to be a toss up between like Sudier, Roland Jones, or DJ Smokey in general. Like, I think the best example I can give, and I think I have the vinyl Only Two Left Alive right now, that was probably like, when it came to the visuals, when it came to the overall album in general, that was probably the best storytelling I've ever heard.
Yeah, I agree with you. And if you think about those three personalities, like, I mean, they're all super talented producers, but I think they all have different approaches and angles. I mean, it still sounds cohesive when you put them all in a mix, but to your point, that storytelling and like what 𝖒𝖏𝖏𝖏 I think puts out often can be pretty different than like Kush Aliens, you know? Like it's impressive. And in my mind, I think that low pressure approach is what keeps it nice and fresh. Like I threw out a fucking like J-pop remix the other day just because like I wanted to make something different. It's not funk. It's not like I have like any sort of label like coming at me for making something completely different. Like just take risks and do whatever you want. I don't know. It's not like making any money off of it, so I might as well just like try something else for the shits and gigs.
Yeah, for real. Like even if it being incohesive or anything, like definitely you can tell a story out of something so small as a producer tag, or like something as small as a movie quote, and can have it span through a 2 to 5 minute track. And it's just crazy how people are that creative to do an entire tape, just let
Yeah.
alone one song.
I mean, well, we're on the subject of tapes. Like I think we'd be remiss to mention like Cloudbug's latest, especially, was just like it was just like all so cohesive. But I like you couldn't stop listening to it. And then you have like Shadowstar, who like just completely just slams the fuck out of your sound system in like the best way, and isn't afraid to like throw the cleanest or dirtiest like there's I think that a lot of authenticity and like honesty in like what these people put out. I don't need to have the most complicated music. Sometimes this stuff is mind-blowingly complicated, but I don't think that's what like makes something necessarily profound. It can, but even something more just simple that curates this whole like, you know, emotion element, even if it's all just resampled elements, like I'm not gonna knock it.
If it sounds good, it sounds good at the end of the day.
Mhm.
Like people can
Yeah.
definitely put a spin off the same sample, and both of us have definitely heard like a reused sample be spun
Yeah.
off 4 or 5, 6, maybe even 20 different ways by different people that have a different story. Oh Jesus, it's been almost it's about to be 2 hours. Jesus.
Dude, I'm trying to get away from it, but at least that gives you like plenty to snip up and condense. I'm sure we didn't sound like complete idiots at some points, right? So
I'm hoping, because like the beginning of it, I was like, okay, what do I do, or like what do I talk about? Because I like, you probably could hear I was nervous as shit when I was starting.
dude, I've had to like do these on your side for like other things, and it's tough, man. I mean, always here to like revisit if we ever need to, but you know, just have fun with it. I think there's some good gems in there.
Yeah, definitely. Like, who do you think might be like a good person to like talk to like in this format like next, or like who would you want to see like that probably would want to be interviewed? Because I know for a fact there's like 3 or 4 different people I definitely do want to interview. One is Pygmalion, because we literally just had a conversation about just music in general, and he showed me, like, we just listened through his entire album. Another person is Evan from Center Circle, because
Yep.
we did like, he's very vocal, not very vocal, but he's very visible. Like, he's everywhere, surprisingly, and he drops, I think he dropped, I don't know how much he drops, but he definitely used to drop a lot, especially like when we first started talking to each other. I definitely do want to get like Center Circle and Masterminds a little bit more exposure, because like people talk about Holy Mob and Purple Posse, but not a lot of people talk about you two in general.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, you guys
Like
are really underrated.
Evan the villain's super talented too. Like the whole Center Circle group, and Ray's, I think is how you say his name. He's in Masterminds, but I think he's a big part of Center Circle as well. And you know, hopefully we can do a collab tape. But no, I think those are good people. And dude, Pygmalion, like he puts so much thought and like meditation into whatever he puts out, whether it's a tape or anything else. Like he's a very like cerebral dude. If you need other names, honestly, like the ones that come to mind for me are the 𝖒𝖏𝖏𝖏𝖏𝖏𝖏, because he's pretty outspoken and he's pretty like bold, which I think he can be because he's been around and he's so knowledgeable. Like he would be great to interview, because if you ask him what he thinks about something, he'll tell you in like the best way possible. And then honestly, like you should round back with Little Rocket Man. I mean, he's like the Santa Claus of funk, dude. He's just in every single city, right?
Yeah, that's
Um,
true, man. I was gonna like talk to him on the
yeah,
actual trip, but I was so nervous. Like the first time we actually met in person, he was just showing me how to like spin in general, and I was like, what the fuck do I do, bro? Like, I'm just so nervous in general. I'm in a different state. I don't know. I only know like a few people with the exception of him. It was just so overwhelming, just like taking that leap of faith in general. Like I was just struck because I remember meeting Vaughn and back when at the Black Box, bro. I was so nervous. Like in my head I was like, oh, they're a producer, I'm a producer, that's cool. But then like it's just weird like meeting somebody that you've listened to for like so many years in general. It's sort of not meeting your hero, but just meeting an idol that basically helped you throughout life in general.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, I've heard they're super nice folks. I'm looking forward to meeting them. But again, to your point, it's like we're all kind of like producers here, which I think is like such a funny element. At first, I thought it was like a curse, but it's more of a blessing, I think, because again, like everyone is impressionable, but like when you can translate in some inspiration that you heard the other Friday night at a show, like, and then motivates you to make something of your own, like that helps accelerate, I think, the growth and the development and the maturity of the genre.
I don't know if it's gonna be possible, but I do want to get 2 different sections of interviews done with Vaughn, like the Yokai version and like the actual Vaughn Storm version, because I want to know more about like how Holy Mob was like formed in general, and like how he actually decided to come up with that concept that he probably wasn't able to fit in like those 2 videos in general, because I think that would be a really good conversation.
That dude's smart. I really liked seeing his video on like his first set at the Black Box. I thought that was really refreshing. And anyone who's ever interested in starting to mix live, like that's a good place to start, because a lot of the issues he had, I had, and like you're kind of freaking out about it, but you just got to get up there and keep cool. Like I'm in no way a good public speaker, like public performer. It's just mixing your stuff and having fun. Because there's nothing crazier, like I swear, than like something you made like isolated in your apartment. And then you see people like really fucking with it, and you're just like, okay, cool. This was kind of for me, but it seems like everyone else is liking it too. And on top of that, like playing some of this stuff from like my favorite like producers who, sure, like they're notable, but I don't think they get as much attention as they should. Like every single time I go to play, it's almost non-negotiable that I'm gonna play Space Cadet by Nemo, who's in Lost Boys, like, and he's notable, like he gets plenty of like love, but that track and some of his other stuff is just like so unbelievable. And I can go into these sets like knowing people haven't heard this track potentially before, and like wait till they get to the breakdown area where he starts like really like messing with the stutters and then bringing in and out the female chorus vocals that come through and like really cut. He'll tell you that track isn't mastered well enough, and I think he's full of shit, but he was the one smart enough to make it, so he's probably right. I don't know.
It's kind of funny because I feel like you definitely had this before, and probably every producer has had this. This track isn't done. Like you have to go back and tweak it every once in a while.
It gets even worse, man. Sorry, I'm pouring myself a drink, but it gets even worse when you start DJing, because you build like a minute 30 of a track and you're like, okay, this isn't done to release, but this is done enough for me to dip into this track for like 60 seconds to get to somewhere else. Like half of my set list probably for the Ryan show is just my own stuff unreleased, because I've been so busy planning for it. Like I just get a track in good enough shape that I think it won't sound terrible on speakers.
Yeah, definitely. Oh man, I'm just excited just to see that show. I just want to see like how many people actually show up.
Dude, I'm hoping that it gets sold out. Like I'm really pushing for it. And I don't think this is necessary, but I think the more that people understand that, like the way that, like if you're a Phonk fan and like you've been hoping for something like this and you can make it out, then like people really should. Because if the community comes out in this unprecedented amount, ticket sales are good. Everyone who was part of that process of planning, whether they were the ones who directly put their own money on the line, whether they're the ones who carried in the speakers, like they realized that it was worth it, and they were one of the first people, at least on the East Coast, to really throw something like this. So just, we need this chronically online genre to really show up in droves, which early indications are looking really good.
And also like people need to like document this stuff too, because not only would it help me out tremendously, but it'll help out people that also probably want to get into different live sets in general. It can happen with one person. Like I'm being so serious about that. It literally only happened with one person. Like surprisingly, somebody saw, I think the Phonk monthly video that I released. I think that was probably the reason that they either went to the show or the way that they found out about my name. And
Yeah,
that just
dude.
had like a trickle effect.
Yeah, and like even like when I posted about my first sets on Reddit, the response was like pretty impressive. People being like, "Oh, like bet I'll be there," or "Oh, can you do a show here? Can you do a show here?" When I first posted about the Ryan show coming up, people were like, "Oh, I'd really like it if like 𝖒𝖏𝖗𝖏𝖏 was on a roster." At the time, it was in public, but he ends up being on one. It was like, "Oh, I really wish you could do one down in like Dallas." Yep, that we're doing that. Can you come to the northwest? Like people were, before even knowing that those were opportunities, like actively asking for them. When that night that you came to what was it, the Crown, was that what it was called, that venue where me, you, and Pygmy met up?
I think that's because it definitely wasn't the 810.
No, that was cool. But this dude, Armed Coin, came down and filmed like one of the tracks I played. I didn't know the guy. I didn't know that he was coming. And he threw it up on YouTube, and like I'm like, holy shit, like this guy's the homie. He came all the way like just to come through, like listen to my like set at the time. Like it wasn't like an empty room, but it wasn't like a packed room either. Like this dude really just loves the genre, wanted to see it played live, and like came through. So yeah, every little effort we put, man, like if it brings one additional person through, like let's all treat each other well and like keep that past the buck, right?
Yeah, definitely. Like
It's
I,
cool.
I know definitely like I wasn't able to do this alone, and I'm definitely inspired by other people that not only make videos or just different podcasts or different formats of shows in general, especially like the Phonk show or like what 𝖒𝖏𝖗𝖏𝖏𝖏𝖏 used to do, and just keeping more
Mhm.
eyes on the Phonk community in general. Well, it's not even a but in that sense. It's just I can't do this alone, and I know for a certain fact that without having people to connect with or without having that communal aspect of everything, nothing can
Yeah.
get done. Nothing can get done alone. That's a fact. Like you definitely either need to have a family or a team. Without either of those two, like you're not gonna get that far. Like it's definitely something that needs to be told to a lot of people, because growing alone can only get you to certain places in life, but definitely having a team behind you can get you way further than you ever expected.
Yeah, and I mean like it's not every genre where you have like what we consider the big names being super supportive and for the community. Like shout out to like Jacoby and to Jason Rich and Dre to Ski Mask. Like these people, like in my mind, and maybe just my mind and a select few of us, you know, the genre, but those are like household names, and like they'll take the time to like, you know, shoot it with you, work on something. Like it's it feels like a rarity having like some of these people that we look up to so much, like so willing to help like uplift other people too. So
Yeah, it's definitely awesome. I'm gonna just stop right here. It's still recording right now, so it's been a pleasure. And then there'll definitely be a guest again. I would say. I'm not sure if it's just gonna be like a show. I don't have a name for the show, but it's just gonna be like the Bad Kids interview.
I'm good with that, man. Whatever you need. Always good for us to talk about this stuff, right?
Yeah, definitely.